In Utah tonight, authorities are considering shutting down a popular destination for adventurers.
John Jones was enjoying a family holiday, exploring deep within the earth. He became trapped 125 feet below ground. A pulley snapped and he slipped back into the narrow crevice.
Stuck in that position for going on 23 hours now makes it very difficult for him.
What do people fear the most? Darkness, isolation, confined spaces, helplessness, death? What would you do if you faced all these fears at once? This is a situation that John Edward Jones would face. A situation in which John would be trapped 100 feet underground forever. November 24th, 2009. John Edward Jones, a father, husband, and medical student, was traveling home to Utah from Virginia. He was attending a medical school in Virginia so that his wife, a Virginia native, could live close to her family. However, for Thanksgiving, they decided to travel west, back to John's hometown, and visit his family. Once back home in Utah, John would embrace his loved ones that he hadn't seen for some time, and discuss his life and studies back east. But it would be his meeting with his brother Josh that would prove to be the most significant of these exchanges. With Josh, John would be reminded of his past and a long-lost love. During his youth, John, his siblings, and his father loved to explore caves together in Utah, and John carried this love into his adulthood. However, because John had moved to Virginia, he had not had the opportunity to do so in years. But now, he was back in Utah, and the opportunity was now. His brother Josh knew of a popular cave in the area that had just reopened a few months back. Accompanied by 10 other friends and family, including his brother Josh, he decided to travel and to descend into the Nutty Putty cave, located in rural northern Utah, about 55 miles from Salt Lake City. The Nutty Putty cave was a popular destination for caving enthusiasts and attracted upwards of 10,000 visitors per year, with lines forming at its entrance during peak seasons. Discovered in 1960 by Dale Green, it was named after the clay that is found in many of the 1,400 feet of chutes and tunnels that make up the cave network. John had never explored this cave before. It had just reopened 6 months prior. Authorities had previously decided to close the cave due to incidents such as cavers getting stuck in tight passages and in some cases dying due to drowning. But for one reason or another, they decided to reopen it and allow new cavers to enter. Now, John may have been unaware of this past. We don't exactly know. But regardless, at 8 p.m., he decided to enter the cave with his friends and family. Immediately upon entering, a sense of nostalgia would have hit John and reminded him of his childhood caving outings, and allow him once again to feel that sense of adventure that entranced him as a child. As a group, they would first explore a large chamber known as the Big Slide, but that wasn't what John was after. Instead, he wanted to explore the famed Birth Canal, a tight but navigable passageway that many explorers who came to Nutty Putty wanted to conquer, and John was no different. So wanting to seek a true adventure, John and his brother decided to split off from the group to search for the passageway. However, since this was their first time in the cave, he wasn't quite sure what the passageway was exactly. Due to this, John and Josh would split up to widen their search, hoping to discover the Birth Canal. As he progressed in his search, John eventually came across an unmapped region of the cave where he spotted a small and waist-high hole. Going in head first, he would push himself into the hole. The space was tight and he had to rely on his hips, stomach, and fingers to move. Like a snake, he slithered himself forward. Most other cavers that knew of this passageway tended to avoid it due to his reputation of being a tight and difficult twisted tunnel of rock, a passage that only the smallest of cavers could successfully navigate. This would prove quite difficult for John, who himself was 6 foot tall and weighed 200 pounds. Realizing the journey was only getting harder, John wanted to turn around and leave, but couldn't find any space big enough to make that turn. So instead, he decided to push forward, hoping that he would eventually come across a spot wide enough for him to turn his body around. Heading forward, John noticed a fissure that dropped at almost a 90-degree angle. From John's perspective, it may have appeared to open up near the end, allowing John to turn around, but unfortunately, this would be nothing but an illusion. Regardless, he decided to move ahead. Sucking in his chest to be able to move forward, John would end up sliding forward over the edge of the rock and straight into this fissure. When John expanded his chest, he realized the worst. He was stuck. During his struggle to free himself, he would accidentally push himself deeper. With his arms pinned and him completely upside down, his options were nil. To make things worse, his headlamp would bounce off, leaving him in darkness. John couldn't go any forward even if he wanted to, as the fissure ahead narrowed and all but closed. In the dark, alone, he was helpless. His greatest fear had become a reality, and John was now at the mercy of the cave, and most importantly, his family and friends finding him. All John could do now was wait and pray for deliverance. It wasn't completely hopeless for John, as his brother Josh would soon discover him stuck. Josh would crawl through the same passageway to reach his brother, and even become stuck temporarily as well. Originally, Josh believed that the situation surrounding John wasn't too bad, and even thought it would be a fun story to tell their family once they were through it. But once he reached his brother and saw his feet and how far deep he was stuck, he realized that things were far more serious than he originally believed. Josh would try to pull at his brother's calves in an attempt to free him, but to no avail. The two brothers, devout Mormons, decided to pray together, asking God to guide us as we work through this. After failing to save his brother, Josh made his way out of the passageway and realized that he needed to contact the authorities immediately. Josh worked closer to the surface to call 911, and another friend went to John to stay with him. Once the authorities had been called, Josh ventured back into the passageway to relieve his friend and keep John company. To pass the time and distract their minds from the current predicament, the two brothers would discuss their futures and families and sing religious hymns together to ease the tension. Fear not, I am with thee, O be not dismayed, for I am thy God, and I will still give thee aid. I'll strengthen and help thee, and cause thee to stand upheld by my righteous, omnipotent hand. John himself would pray to God, saying, I'm so sorry, Father, just get me out of here, save me from my wife and kids. Eventually, the search and rescue teams would arrive at the cave. Josh didn't want to leave his brother, but he had no choice, as the rescuers would need all the space they could get to free him. John would eventually tell his brother that it was okay to leave, and Josh rushed to the entrance to meet the rescuers. The first rescuer to make it to John was a young woman by the name of Susie Marla. Susie was a volunteer in the local search and rescue team, and like John, was an avid explorer of caves. She was familiar with the Nutty Putty cave, and had even gotten stuck there once before, and therefore could understand what John was going through. Though Susie was small in stature, an attribute that would have limited her in other scenarios, her size here would allow her to reach John more easily than some of the other rescuers. It was now 12:30 a.m., and John had been stuck for 3 hours upside down. With gravity pulling most of his blood to his head, his heart now had to work harder than ever before. The human body isn't designed to operate in this fashion, and John's heart would eventually give out if he wasn't saved. This meant that for the rescuers, every second counted. Every minute that passed, John was stepping closer to death. When Susie reached John, she would introduce herself, and John would reply, Hi Susie, thanks for coming, but I really want to get out of here. All Susie could see was John's navy and black running shoes, with the rest of him swallowed up by the fissure below. Susie tried to free John in a multitude of ways, but to no success. John was stuck good, and the cave wouldn't surrender him without a fight. She eventually tied a rope to John, and the other rescuers tried to pull. However, due to the friction of the rocks and John's positioning, this proved unsuccessful. Susie even cut off a part of his jeans to create a few precious inches of space, but this didn't help either. The situation was proving to be more difficult and dire by the second. To lighten the mood during this time, Susie tried to keep John in conversation to ease his mind. She would even start to hum a Mormon hymn. This would incite John to ask her about her faith, and like with his brother Josh, he found commonality and comfort through his Mormon faith during this dark time, even though Susie had fallen away from Mormonism. Throughout this entire ordeal, Mormonism would create a bond between John and many of the other rescuers. However, as seconds melted into minutes, then melted into hours, John was beginning to show signs of degradation. His voice became more nasal, and he struggled to breathe. At this point, the rescue team decided to come up with another solution. They would instead set up a complex pulley system to help overcome the issues with friction and John's unfavorable position. The anchors for the system were planted into the rocks, and pulleys and ropes were installed afterward. The entire process was slow due to the distance and tight passageways. The process to set up this system would take hours that John did not have many to spare. While the rescuers were working around the clock underground, back on the surface, a barrage of activity was underway. The Utah County Sheriff's Office has set up a command center to organize and lead the rescue operations. Here, leaders of the rescue team worked together to brainstorm any idea that could prove useful. Rescuers contacted those that had taken part in previous rescues for advice, brought in equipment to drill through the rock, and even ordered vegetable oil to make John more slippery and easier to move. But none of these ideas would prove successful. Even John's family, including his wife Emily, arrived at the site hoping for news that John was freed. I knew I couldn't do anything to help, but I really wanted to give him a hug when he got out, Emily said. I just imagined him being really tired and scared. The pulley system that had been devised had helped to rescue others before, but John was heavier and far more stuck than anyone before him. As the team pulled at the rope, John was being pulled inch by inch, but once his feet hit the ceiling of the tunnel, he screamed out in pain. Being stuck at a sharp angle, pulling him out could likely break his legs. The realization of this fact frightened the rescuers, as this could kill him due to his weakened state. The situation only appeared to be more dire as each minute passed. John had been at this point trapped upside down for 12 hours. Fluids were beginning to pool in his brain and lungs. Time and geometry weren't on his side, and something needed to be done quickly. Something that wouldn't involve breaking his legs, as the very shock of that could be the end of him. The rescuers decided to rebuild the pulley system and immediately got to work drilling new holes for the anchors. They would now try again to pull up John inch by inch. While some of the rescuers were pulling on the rope, another rescuer, by the name of Ryan Schertz, stayed close to John and tried to shift John's body to help him out. This was it. Their last opportunity to free John. Being upside down for 12 hours had taken its toll, and any longer, John would certainly perish. To make matters worse, John was beginning to lose his connection with reality, and was becoming delusional due to the stress on his brain. At one point, John even began to blame the rescuers for putting him in the fissure. Ryan would try to bring as much comfort as he could to John, and would stretch a tube down to him so that he could drink, and would stay by his side to let him know that he wasn't alone. As before, Ryan and John connected to the shared Mormon faith. However, these distractions didn't work as before. At this point, John would enter into a dark cycle of behavior. Calm, panic, calm, panic, calm, panic. Ryan would try desperately to bring John's mind back to ease. It seemed that the only thing that could calm him was the thought of his family, the thought of his wife, 1-year-old daughter, and second child to be, would bring him comfort and light when he languished in the darkness. Therefore, Ryan tried to keep John's mind fixated on them. Eventually, rescuers would bring down a two-way radio so that John could speak with his wife. Emily told John to keep fighting, and John promised that he would get out and see her again. November 25th, 2009. It was now 4 p.m. and almost 19 hours had passed since John became stuck. The new pulley system was done and another attempt could be made. This was it. John didn't have much time left, and any mistakes now would be fatal. Ryan told John that the rescuers were ready and that he would need to try to push with his hands to help them get him over the sharp angle. Tug after tug, the rescuers worked tirelessly. Progress was slow, but John came up inch by inch. But once again, when his feet hit the ceiling, he felt a strong wave of pain hit him instantly. John was lowered to give him some time to rest and recover. Once he was ready, the rescuers then lifted him again, and Ryan was able to get a glimpse of John's face, the first person to see him since he got trapped. Though his eyes were red due to his tears, John looked healthy enough, and a sense of euphoria hit Ryan as it seemed that this might work. After all this time, John might be rescued. They stopped again to give John a chance to rest. A few minutes later, they pulled again. Everything seemed to be going well. John might actually see his wife and family soon enough, but before that could happen, disaster would strike again. Out of nowhere, snap, and Ryan went unconscious, but when he awoke, there was blood everywhere. The cave had struck again. Part of the stone arc that was supporting the rope had shattered, and the rope had been cut in two. Ryan himself had been struck in the face with metal from the pulley system, and John had slid back into the hole again. After all this time, they were back to square one. A sense of dread overcame everyone. All this work and effort had been for nothing. They didn't have much time to spare. Though the rescuers were still filled with vigor, John had lost hope and told the rescuers that he was going to die right there. He asked, "I'm not going to come out of here, am I?" Soon after, John would fall silent and become unresponsive. Once again, the rescuers began to drill new holes for the pulleys, and a radio was brought down so that Emily could speak with John, but her words would fall on deaf ears, and John wouldn't respond. He had lost consciousness and would never wake up. Close to midnight on November 25th, John was pronounced dead. He had been stuck for over 24 hours and was now gone. The search and rescue team packed up their things and headed back to the entrance of the cave. Many hoped that they would emerge triumphant, but instead, they arrived defeated. Emily and his family were distraught, and they had to force themselves to leave the cave, knowing that there was anything that could be done at this point. The next day, November 26th, it was revealed to the family that even getting John's corpse out of the cave was impossible either. Now that John was dead, he couldn't assist the rescuers, and the operation was too dangerous for them. His family, though upset and horrified, agreed that it was senseless to endanger anyone else. The cave itself would become John's tomb. What had first given John joy and adventure would now give him rest. In the aftermath, the cave itself would be closed once again, but this time for good. Too many incidents had occurred, and another couldn't be risked. The entrance was closed off with concrete, and explosives were used to collapse the tunnel that led to John. A memorial plaque was installed by the entrance of the cave to honor his memory. John ultimately died of cardiac arrest doing what he loved. He was now one with nature, and one with Utah itself. Those who were with him, such as his brother Josh or rescuers like Susie and Ryan, will live with the memory of John for the rest of their lives, playing the events in their minds, thinking what could have been done differently. While John left the world, his wife Emily would bring another into it and give birth to the second child on June 15th, 2010. The baby was named John in honor of his father. I just know that he's still watching out for us, that our family is still a family. Emily Jones.